And with that, welcome you inside this week opening edition of Big Ten Today. Rick Piso thrilled to be joined by the road warrior himself, Howard Griffith, back from the training camp tour. Great to have you back in studio. I know, Howard, we talked after media days. We felt like there was a different vibe with the 4 West Coast schools coming in. Did it feel the same way when you were on those campuses and even visiting the schools that were here before August 2nd?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I take away immediately is just the excitement that's around our programs that have been here. Some of the places that I've been, there is a different vibe. They feel a lot different. Being at Maryland, there was a different vibe, a different attitude around the team. You think about what Coach Loxley has been able to do. He's loose, the team's loose. So I think everybody at this particular point, more so than any time before, has a very calm and relaxed type of an attitude going into this.
I think the unknown is there for everyone. It's not just the 4 Big Ten schools who come in trying to figure out how this is going to work. Everybody is in the same boat. Of course, the 4 West Coast schools have a little bit more travel once you get into conference play.
A little bit.
And at least one of them has a lot more change to deal with than just a new league. Our big story does take us out west, where all 4 of the league's new additions begin their first seasons in a little bit of flux, but none more so than UCLA. Not just a new conference, but an unexpected head coaching change, a major loss in the coordinator space, and a roster that is drastically different, all helping frame a season that will surely look like none other in the history of Bruins football. It was almost exactly 6 months ago when then head coach Chip Kelly turned the college football world on its ear by leaving Westwood and leaving millions on the table to become the OC at Ohio State. Of course, just 3 days later, Bruin legend, longtime assistant Deshaun Foster got his first ever head coaching job at any level, a job that begins in earnest when the Bruins travel to Hawaii for their season opener on August the 31st. Deshaun Foster, who I got to cover as a player, was actually in North Carolina when he got drafted by the Carolina Panthers. I believe that was in 2001. He is a soft-spoken guy, a guy who prefers for his actions more than his words to tell the story. But the players, by all measure, absolutely love him and have bought into what he is trying to sell. Yeah. The issue is, do you have enough pieces to go along with that sell job to compete inside the toughest conference in the country?
I'd say this. He is soft-spoken, no question about it, when he's not on the football field. When he's on the field, he is into it and really engaged with the players, has done a really good job. Had a chance to see him this spring, and he does a great job of moving around the field and trying to understand what all is going on that's out there. But they have pieces out there, but they still have a tall order to try to get out and be as competitive as they need to be this year.
So you try to think about everything that's gone on in Westwood, and I think Chip Kelly departing was not anything that Martin Jarman, the AD, or any of the coaches on that staff could have expected, but he wanted to just, in his own words, coach ball. So the job goes to Deshaun Foster just 3 days later. It's not as if he needs to change the culture, because it's a culture he knows so well, being a longtime running back. But, Howard, I think we can all agree that his job is as hard, if not harder, than any coach leading these new schools into the league. Jed Fish, a first-year guy at Washington, a brand-new roster as well. I would argue that Deshaun's job is the toughest of the 4.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's a tough job, but he brought in Eric Bieniemy, who's going to be a major help to him, who knows that L.A. area very well since he grew up there, and he's also coached at UCLA. So I think there's some pieces that are in place. I think one of the positive things is he's really opened up his practices and opened up this UCLA to the community, because it had been kind of closed. They just wanted to kind of focus on what was going on. Deshaun Foster has done a tremendous job of the outreach, and I think that's part of what we're not going to see in the wins and loss column. He's really helping the program in many ways. It won't show up there, but this is still a project. This is still, they've got a lot of work to do, and he understands it. It's not an easy job, but I think he's built to be able to take them to where they need to go.
I get the sense, too, that this is going to be about fundamentals and the elementary building blocks, especially at the beginning. Yes, you have a quarterback in Garbers who has some experience, but you look at Deshaun Foster's history, the position he played. He was the running backs coach as well. He was asked at Media Day, Deshaun, do you expect to run some inside zone, some outside zone? He said, all of that and then some. I sense offensively they are going to be defined by what they do inside the tackle box.
Yeah, I think ultimately you want to be able to play strong defense and be able to run the football. One of the things, you go back to looking at them last year, they made huge strides on the defensive side of the ball. Now, they ended up losing their defensive coordinator to the crosstown rival. So they'll have to be able to meet that expectation defensively. Again, seeing them, they have the guys there to be able to make things happen. Are they deep? Do they need to continue to develop depth? Yeah, but everybody who doesn't need to develop depth. It's just going to be a process, and I think he's going to be okay.
And that's where the transfer portal comes in, because when you take over in February, when all the change that is going on is you're the guy that's in charge of that, you need ready-made players. And the transfer portal gives you the ability to have ready-made players at your disposal, especially on the defensive end. You touched on Danton Lynn, who leaves UCLA to go to USC. Lincoln Riley has talked about what a coup he believes that is. One of the most highly respected defensive coordinators in this business. How does it kind of affect a departure like that, especially to your crosstown rival? Does it affect the players that return to this defense and know they have to be a huge key cog with that fundamentally first system?
Well, let's think about it this way. One of the reasons that Lincoln Riley went out and got Danton Lynn was the fact that he took the pieces that UCLA had the previous year. It wasn't like they had an influx of talent that came in. He took the same guys that had been on that defense the previous year and really transformed them into one of the best defenses in all of college football. That was his calling card. So now for the next guys to have to understand, they have to step up and raise the level, because now it's a different style of play that they're going to be looking at. I'm not so willing to say that just because you're out on the West Coast, you can't be physical at the point of attack. I think that's a misnomer. I think we're going to find out that if UCLA can do what they need to do, the fundamentals, it's blocking, it's tackling, being able to stop the run, being able to run the football, that will shorten the games for them and allowing their quarterback to go out and make some plays. They have guys at the skill positions. All these teams do, because there's so many of these guys that are running around. You talk about the length. You talk about just the ability to speed. They have those components that are in place. It's making sure that they're running the right offense that can put them in a position to be successful. And it's no doubt that there's going to be some growing pains, but Bieniemy is outstanding. He's coached, one of the best that's ever played that position thus far in his career. He still has a lot of years when you think about that. So I think it's just about buying in and understanding what the expectations and what the identity is ultimately going to be for this team.
Well, let's finish there with expectations, because Deshaun Foster was asked multiple times at media days, what defines success? Really tough question for a first-year coach in his situation to answer. Of course, you want to get to the postseason. That is goal number one. It's always going to be there. You need to be playing in some type of bowl game. But I think putting a wins or losses total is almost unfair, not just for any program, but specifically for UCLA this year. How do you think at the end of it, Deshaun will define whether 2024 was a success or not?
I think one of the things he has to look at is the team competing for 4 quarters, right? That is a big part of what they need to get to. And I'm not saying they didn't do that last year, but that's how you can really identify what's happening in the culture of your program. Are they playing hard all the time? What's happening with the mental mistakes? Now, we don't get a chance to see that so often because we don't get the grades of the players, but you see when big plays are given up on the defensive side. That kind of stands out, so you know that probably a mental mistake was made. So if you can limit those mental mistakes, right, you're playing hard all the time, everything else will take care of itself. It's going to be tough, but the challenge is making sure that everyone's buying into the same system and giving their all.
How come you're not on the land yet on your way to Westwood? You didn't get the L.A. call?
I didn't get the L.A. call. They wanted to send Coach DiNardo out there.
You're not a beach guy? Yeah, DiNardo's a beach guy.
I want to be out on the beach, but hey, not this time.
DiNardo's a tennis guy, not a beach guy. Yes, our training camp tour has made its way to the idyllic UCLA campus for a visit with Coach Deshaun Foster and the Bruins. You can see video from UCLA practice, exclusive interviews, and expert analysis. Wait, should I change that? You said it was Jerry, right?
Well, yeah, Yogi's out there as well,
Fair enough.
It's expert.
It's the debut airing of our football training camp UCLA show, Monday night, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific.
And pleased to have Ryan Walters, head coach of the Boilers, with us now. Second year for you in this position. What did you learn about yourself in year one as a head coach?
I learned how to use my time to help this team, with the talents that I have, how to best use those without micromanaging. so I'm learning how to inundate myself within the defense and put my fingerprint on the defense while still being the head coach and letting my personality and the way I want things run to be run on offense, defense, special teams. So I think everybody's on the same page, and I'm not having to micromanage, and just much more efficient this time around.
It felt like things really started to click at the end of last year, particularly offensively, those last few games. What do you think was different in mid to late November versus early in the year offensively?
One, obviously, the Hudson Card, first time being a full-time starter, getting used to the offense and commanding a huddle. Also we weren't playing Michigan and Ohio State.
There is that.
And we were able to have the same group of offensive linemen play with one another. We dealt with a lot of injuries, especially, early to mid the portion of the season. So I just think the combination of those three things led to having more sustained and more sustained success.
So how do you carry that forward?
The same thing. Like we did bring in a lot of new faces offensively, in particular offensive line and wide receiver, new running back. So you get those guys here in January. Now you get to know each other. You get to go through walkthroughs and routes on air and get on the same page. Hudson's a more mature version of himself, more comfortable with what we're asking him to do from a leadership and a schematic standpoint. He's also gained weight to maintain his health throughout the year. And so, those guys have been firing on all cylinders through spring and the summer, and it's carried over into fall camp.
You talk about the new faces you brought in. One of the things, just kind of painting with somewhat of a broad brush here, it feels like some of the body types are different. Like at wide receiver, you are longer. I noticed that in the secondary as well.
Yeah.
Is that a coincidence, or is that a concerted effort to change?
No, definitely a strategic effort. We got Jamal Edgerrin 6'3" and some change, 215. Jerron Tibbs is 6'4". 212. You got Leland Smith is 6'4", 215. And then our speedy, fast guy, C.J. Smith, he's 6'2", 195. And so we've gotten a lot bigger out on the outside, a lot more athletic. You look up front, we took 6 transfer offensive linemen that got here in January, and the smallest one was 6'4", 315. So definitely this is the Big Ten, and the emphasis is on big. And so it felt like we needed to get bigger. The old adage is big people beat up little people. So that was definitely a concerted effort.
We know about Hudson and Devin Mockabee, and Max Clare, when he was healthy, was tremendous last year. So those are some of the guys I think that people would be expecting to be stars for you this year offensively. How about some people that maybe Big Ten fans aren't aware of that you think could really shine?
Jamal Edgerrin has been everything we thought he was going into camp last year. And, obviously practice 2 is when he had the season-ending injury. He has gone to work, and it shows. His leadership in that room, they've sort of taken on his personality, and he's as competitive as the guys I've been around. So, I think he'll find a lot of balls and make a lot of plays for us this season. George Byrne, another guy we had last year that was a freshman, tight end who's, he's 6'5" and some change. He was 209 last year. He's 240 now, so that's a different guy. He's also the 110 state champion in the hurdles. So, a big guy that can run, and we're excited to sort of showcase him a little bit this year.
On defense, you were a big play defense last year. You made a lot of big plays, and you gave up a lot of big plays. So what's the balancing act? Do you back off a little bit in the aggression up front in order to preserve the back end, or was it more kind of we just made mistakes and the scheme was right? And how do you handle that?
So we looked at all of our explosive plays and sort of put them into a couple different categories. One, was it a technique issue? So was it okay play call, just play with better technique? One, was it a schematic issue? And then 3, was it a talent issue? And so, based off of those findings, we sort of catered to how we approached the spring, how we approached recruiting, and, the emphasis on what we're teaching in fall camp. I do think we got a lot better in the secondary. You add a guy like Nyland Green, who's as talented a corner as I've ever been around. Kendrick Breedlove, who, is a quick, strong guy that can play in the slot and out on the perimeter. And then you got a more mature and older version of Dylan Thieneman, who was an All-American a year ago, and he's way better than he was last year. And so, I'm excited about those guys, and I think we'll play much better in the secondary.
Tell me about the decision to move Kadrin to more of an inside linebacker spot. He can be such a disruptive force. Why do you think he's better off there?
Well, when he was out on the edge to the field, he could only play on the field side, and so he can only make plays on the field side. And so, put him in the cylinder, he can now play sideline to sideline, and he went from being an average-sized rush in to a big linebacker. He's 6'2", 255, and can run. I think he hit 21 miles per hour on a GPS, this summer. And so, now that he's in the middle, he can make more plays. He's very savvy there, and with Will Helt getting another year under his belt, into the boundary, and then adding some guys with some length and some size out on the edge of the field, you feel pretty good about where you're at on defense.
I'm going to leave you with this. The schedule is not easy, as you're probably aware, and it starts challenging. I mean, you've got Notre Dame and Oregon State there in those first 3 games, and Oregon State's kind of in limbo, but for all intents and purposes, a power conference program. They certainly were when you scheduled them. We all know what Notre Dame is. What are the biggest things that you need to do between now and then to be ready for those 2 big games early?
Yeah, obviously we got to stay healthy. We are a different team when our ones are out there, and then just focus on us. I told the guys in the start of camp, nope, the logos and the names don't really mean anything anymore. Nobody knows, who's in the locker room. Nobody knows how it fits. So we don't know what they got and what they added, and they don't know what we got and we added. We'll find out on a Saturday.
Ryan Walters, always fun. Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
appreciate your time.
Boiler up.
Big Ten today, the AP preseason poll released just a few moments ago, hot off the presses, and the Big Ten has a very big presence. 2 teams inside the top 3 with Ohio State and Oregon, 2 more inside the top 10, Penn State at 8, Michigan at 9, and 2 more inside the top 25 with one of the newcomers in USC and the defending West Division champion Iowa Hawkeyes. Of course, there will be no West Division or divisions of any kind in 2024. And with a focus on USC, we look at Lincoln Riley, only one active coach with at least 75 games as a head man under his belt, has a higher winning percentage than Riley, and that's Kirby Smart, who seemingly has Georgia in the national title race every season. In fact, Smart and Riley, the only coaches with these specific qualifications to have won at least 80% of their games. Welcome you back inside our Big Ten Today studio. Rick Pizzo, Howard Griffith. I know that's the past, and it doesn't necessarily have a huge effect on the current season that USC will undertake in 2024. Really tough opener against LSU. But when you have a coach that comes in with those kinds of credentials, there's no question. It makes a massive difference.
It makes a huge difference. You know what the expectations are going to be and where they're trying to get to. So those expectations have been laid out. They understand what it needs to do to be able to get to the next level. And getting to the next level is really about winning championships when you're at USC. So I think you go back to the spring. Actually, you go back to last year as they were starting to prepare for the bowl game. They had a lot of guys that sat out. Lincoln Riley has been on record talking about this was probably some of the most productive practices that he could have had and expected out of his team. When you think about having a generational talent like Caleb Williams at the quarterback position, he's talked a lot about that. Sometimes that can really stifle the offense from a standpoint of maybe he doesn't have to go through all the reads because he's so athletic, is so gifted, and can do so many things that he can get outside of the system. Now he has a young man at quarterback that wants to play inside the system and has been in the system, understands it. So it may look a lot different than what we're accustomed to seeing, these big explosive plays when quarterbacks are getting out of the pocket. So he thinks this is a team that really had an opportunity to gain its identity, but that happened during their bowl preparation. Something that he wasn't really expecting, but probably gives them a leg up as they move in the training camp.
Really impressive bowl performance by Miller Moss, I believe 6 total touchdowns. And I asked Lincoln Riley about something that's being termed as the post-Caleb Williams era at USC, and he said, no disrespect, but I don't like that term because it takes away from what we were as an offense. We weren't one player. Yeah. Caleb was a phenomenal player, but he didn't just define our philosophy. Our philosophy is surrounded by whatever 11 guys are on the field at one time. And I think that's really important to point out. So Moss returns. Zachariah Branch returns being the key word because he's a dynamic return man. But Howard, for those who haven't seen this young man play football, he is going to be utilized, I think, a lot more in the offense this year after getting his feet wet as mainly a return man in 2023. He may be the most dynamic player in college football.
And that's when you talk about being able to get prepared. Now, all of a sudden, you can get him into your offense. You can move him all over the field. He really changes some of the keys for a defensive standpoint because you don't want to just have him single covered. If he gets in space and he's able to get behind people, he's going to make some big plays. So you have to also adjust your defense, and it has to become more of a catch-all. The other interesting thing is we talk about all the technology that's going to come into play. iPads on the sidelines, communication in the helmet for the quarterback. And
it's about time, by the way, with the helmet communication.
Exactly, and whichever player is designated on the defense, we expect that for the most part to be at the linebacker position. But now it really turns into a true cat and mouse game. How quickly can you make adjustments? It's just not about halftime. It's now, guys, get that information right now. And you say, okay, well, they did this at this particular point. They adjusted to our formation that way. You're just so much quicker to be able to get that information in Miller that I think that'll give that team a lot of chances to have those explosive plays that they want.
I don't think there are a lot of questions surrounding this offense after Miller Moss's bowl game performance because now you feel like you have a quarterback that has the keys to a really nice car. The questions are obviously on the other side of the ball. And this defense also played by far its most, I would say, intense game in that bowl game. They tackled better. They went after the football better. But Lincoln Riley knew he needed to address the defense, so he goes crosstown. We mentioned Danton Lynn. It's a significant departure for UCLA and an arguably more significant addition for USC. You've been in these spots. You've watched coordinator changes. How much of a difference can a defensive coordinator make in year one joining a new program?
Well, we've seen it already, right? We've seen what he did at UCLA. And by the way, Rick, he was running 110s with about 9 years old when he was running around with the Broncos. His dad and I were teammates there.
Love that.
So
what
I think it's unbelievable to see where he has grown. And to be truthful, he spent a lot of time with Rex Ryan as he was developing as a defense coordinator while he was still in college.
Good guy to learn from.
So he's really has this defensive philosophy and it's set in stone. But I think it's about demanding the expectations, right? So you take a team like USC that you know traditionally has been explosive. You know what they can do on the offensive side of the football. Now, can you get those guys defensively? They don't want to be the weak link. Nobody wants to, and that's not to say that the players last year were in a situation where we could just go out and do what we needed to do. Everybody wants to play at their very best, but the guy at the front of the room can really dictate that, right? The message that he sends. Sometimes simpler or some of the things that you do when you simplify some things really pays dividends. There's no question USC is not falling off the recruiting map at all. So they have the talent that's there. It's about making sure they're in the right place to be able to take advantage of it.
I'm glad you bring up recruiting because Dan comes in and he can show these recruits we have the chance to be the group that changes how people think of USC, that they don't just think of USC as an offense-first team, and the defense has to be good enough. He wants the defense to be better than good enough. I do want to touch on the schedule because USC better come out of the gates strong. They cannot afford a slow start on either side of the ball. I mentioned the Labor Day Sunday opener against LSU. You also have a road trip to Michigan. You have Penn State. You have Wisconsin. Those are among the first 6 games of your schedule in your first year inside the Big Ten. You cannot afford to get behind the 8 ball. And with that schedule, if you don't play your best, you will be exactly at that point.
When people talk about playing complementary football, we're going to find out early if they can play that complementary football, right? And defense, that travels. You got to be able to take that anywhere you want to. And we talk about it. It's such a cliche. We want to shut down and run. Yeah, you do. You want to try to make teams as one-dimensional as possible. But there are going to be some opportunities for this defense. They're going to have to really dig their heels in and really make some plays because offensively, although they had the outstanding performance in the bowl game, there's still got to be some learning curves on that side of the ball. So which units are going to be ahead? It'll be fascinating to get Coach DiNardo and Yogi's take tomorrow, I believe, to find out just how they feel about this defense.
Yeah, they'll be there on Tuesday, and of course we'll bring you the USC football training camp tour show as well later on Tuesday night, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. Should be a fascinating year in LA. Much more on that. We will hear from Lincoln Riley, hear from select players. I'm assuming Danton Lynn as well. We bring you practice video. The USC football training camp tour show comes your way, debut airing Tuesday, 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 Pacific. Where is the picture of Howard inside the Landjet going from spot to spot? From the Twin Cities to Chambana, College Park to State College, the Banks to the Shoe, couple stops in the Hoosier State. Howard racking up frequent flyer miles, earning all those Hilton honors points for a few weeks, while raiding the occasional local eatery with his partners in crime. It's great to have you here in studio, but it's also a lot of fun to be on the road for these training camp tours, isn't it?
It really is. You think about an opportunity to get out on the campuses, having an opportunity to talk with the coaches, and really this is what we do as a relationship-driven business, right? So understanding what coaches are thinking, knowing that they have the confidence that we're just going to be fair, and that's what it ultimately comes down to, being fair to these teams and trying to get an assessment. It's also difficult because we get to, as Rever says, parachute in for one day of practice, and that one day of practice can be tough because some players may not perform as well as they need to, but you still have to believe in what the coaches are saying from the front of the room.
And it could be shells only, could be raining, could be a walkthrough type practice. Yeah. We'll get to the rain in just a second. But it's interesting because you use the word confidence when you're talking about one of the important aspects of a team. And we start in Bloomington, and Curt Cignetti comes in with a great resume, historical success in turning programs around, and confidence in bunches. Yeah. The question is, what are the realistic expectations for Indiana in year one of what he hopes is bringing this program back to the kind of prominence? He did it at Elon, he did it at James Madison, now he is tasked to doing it in Bloomington.
Yeah, one of the things he'll tell you right away, I expect to win. And we're going to go out and we're going to win, and that's the expectation that's been set. When we go there, you know, they have the quarterback coming in, Rourke, that really had an unbelievable career at Ohio, put up huge numbers there. But the day we saw him, he wasn't at his best. But Jackson, the backup, was unbelievable. And I'm not saying that there's going to be a quarterback battle here. I just think from what I saw, there's some opportunities there for Jackson to be able to step up.
Two very different skill sets there, too.
Very different skill sets. So I think when you start to think about what programs want to do, and think about Indiana traditionally as always, when they were really able to make some moves, they've had a very athletic quarterback under center that can do some different things. So I would not be surprised at all if we saw a couple different packages. But I think after seeing them practice over the weekend, I would not at all be surprised if things seem to open up. And Rourke is no question. They're much better at the wide receiver position. I think they'll make some plays. Defensive line, offensive line is much better. But it's a matter of being able to put things together, and we'll see if they'll be able to do it.
On the other end of the spectrum in terms of expectations sits Ohio State. And it's also interesting because the quarterback position right now at Ohio State is not really being talked about all that much. Will Howard is the presumed starter. Ryan Day hasn't said that. Chip Kelly hasn't said that. But he's a veteran who comes in and is basically told, look around the room. Look behind you. You have Quinshawn Judkins and Travion Henderson. Look on the outside to see the weapons that you have. Look across the line of scrimmage to see the defense that is going to be there for you. Ohio State, absolutely. Preseason looks the part. I know the proof is in the pudding. You have to show me. You have to beat Michigan. You have to win the Big Ten. But this is a team that has all the pieces to win a national title.
Yeah, I'm not going to see Oregon, and that roster is really talented. But when I walk away from Columbus and you watch this Ohio State Buckeye team operate, man, it's hard not to believe that they're not one of the best teams in all of college football. When you look at the veteran leadership that comes back on the defensive side of the football, do they have questions at the offensive line? Sure they do. Some that they really want to settle when they talk about the right side or the right guard, I believe that position in particular. But I think Will Howard has to go out and play. And I think he's one of those players that maybe we don't get a chance to see exactly what he's able to do in practice. Because sometimes it's going to be 2nd and 5, 3rd and 3. He has the ability to pull the ball down and make plays with his legs. You mentioned the running backs. That running back room it's hard to believe that there's a better running back room that's out there when you look at the guys that they have there. So it's about not necessarily trying to manage the game, playing within the system. And what's also fascinating when you think about Chip Kelly, because it's just not about throwing it all over the field, right? He can line up in 3 tight ends and pound it. He can do multiple things to you, so he can create some different looks. They're going to have to throw the ball. It's no question about that, but they've got the players that can do it. And the receivers, that's another embarrassment of riches. But they've got a special one right now that I think is going to shock a lot of people.
And I got to tell you, defensively, JTT comes back, Jack Sawyer comes back, Denzel Burke comes back because they don't have gold pants yet. They want to beat Michigan. And, oh, by the way, all you do is go into the transfer portal and get one of the best players in the country at his position in Caleb Downs.
And he practices like it.
Yeah, a lot of people that have seen Ohio State in practice say he may be the best player on that defense, and there are a lot of good players on that defense. When I look at Rutgers, I see a team, Howard, that if they figure out what they need at the quarterback position and they play up to what is their potential, I think this is a team, and I know people are going to say I'm crazy, but look at their schedule before you tell me I'm crazy. This is a team that could sniff double-digit wins in 2024.
Caliac Mantis is there. Obviously, things didn't work out for him at Minnesota. He's moved on to Rutgers, and there were some questions about his accuracy, but you mentioned the rain. It rained the entire practice. It was miserable out there. I know because I was standing out there in it. He made every throw. He had a smile on his face every time he threw the football. Then we had an opportunity to sit down and interview him after practice. And for me, that's part of making an assessment of what a team is like, right? The confidence, how is that quarterback communicating, how those players, and he seems to be in a really good place mentally. When you watch him interacting on the field, it was outstanding. Again, it was a miserable day, but you couldn't have told him it was miserable out there. He's got a lot to prove. You know, he's got a lot to prove, but he's been reunited with his offensive coordinator, and I think they've got a chance to really make some things happen. And oh, by the way, Kyle Monangai, who's
he'll make pretty much every quarterback smile when you look behind you, and that's the guy that's going to be taking the rock.
Yeah, there's some outstanding backs in this conference, but when you look at Kyle and what he's able to do, and teams knew last year that they were going to turn around and hand it off, and he just falls forward. He's tough to grab. Even his defensive players, the best players on the defensive side, say, you know, he's one of the best backs we see.
Yeah, Rutgers still waiting for that signature win last 4 or 5 years, second coming of the Greg Schiano era. Can they beat Michigan? Can they beat an Ohio State? Can they beat a Penn State? Yeah. Penn State has had so much success under James Franklin. It seems like every year we're talking about a team that gets to 10 wins, goes to a big-time bowl game, but they face the same criticism every year. When are you going to beat Ohio State again? It's been a while. When are you going to beat Michigan? When are you going to get back to the Big Ten championship game? Drew Aller's got a couple of years now. Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, what a recruiting job James Franklin has done over the last couple of years. Keep both those guys in the fold. It just continues to be the year that we ask, is this the year that Penn State goes, in James' own words, from good to great to elite?
Yeah, I think it's no question this team should be in the college football playoffs. We talk about the 12-team playoff. They should actually be there. When you look at what's happening with them, let's look on the defensive side. Tom Allen coming over from Indiana. We talked about Chip Kelly just being able to coach offensively. Well, how about Tom Allen just having to worry about what's going on the defensive side? The challenge for Tom is that they've been so good defensively under the last 2 coordinators that the expectations.
How do you get better?
Yeah, they are there. But we know he knows how to press all the right buttons. And they've got a young man, Abdul Carter. Woo.
Jumps off the screen.
I made a mistake. I decided that I wanted to do kind of a demo deal with him one-on-one. And he punched me with a one of these.
And it was probably 60% because he was probably trying to be a nice guy.
And I'm saying, well, what in the world? Does a spin move and gets off? I'm like, this is a problem. But when you look at him being able to go from the linebacker position to the defensive line, he's going to line up over the center. I thought he would last year. They kind of held that package back for whatever reason. He's going to be all over the field. Defensively, this team is really talented. Long, again, at the corner position. I like where they are. You go on the offensive side, and you mentioned Drew Aller. He is another young man who the expectations have been so high for so long for him, but things have not quite gone the way he wants them to go for the team as well. But I think he's there. He's another one of those players that when you talk with him, he has the confidence. He knows what he wants to do. The challenge when you think about Penn State and the offensive side is they haven't had those explosive plays. right? And I know they're tired of hearing about the explosive plays. They've got a new offensive coordinator. I tell you what, I really enjoyed watching their practice. They were doing some things called teaching on grass. So instead of being in classroom and doing everything in the classroom, they came outside into the indoor and they used the Jumbotron in there as the video monitor. So they coached, everyone's together. They really got so much done. Their 1s, 2s, 3s, and yes, 4s, all were working together at the same time. So it was one of those offenses or one of those schemes where they were getting as many reps as they possibly could get, not just for the starters, but for everyone. That was something that we hadn't seen there before, and I like what they're doing. They're going to really spread things out and try to make people, try to defend the run and the pass with multiple formations. So they have some things that are in place. But you're right, it's still about getting over the hump. And now that hump's been changed a little bit because now we're talking about making the playoffs, and that's going to be huge for a lot of programs.
And they would have been in the playoffs last couple of years. You were talking about a 12-team playoff. Just need a seat at the table. Yeah. One more stop before we go to break, because I know that we've been really impressed by everything that Mike Locksley has done since he came back to the DMV. Personally, we both love Locks as a guy, too. Awesome coach, gets the most out of his players. This is the big question mark year for me, because I think even though they didn't compete maybe at their best against Ohio State, they had a great chance to beat Michigan. They really hung tough with the Buckeyes for about a half, despite Leah not playing his best. But now the question is going to be, can this program continue to get back to the postseason and win bowl games without Taulia Tagovailoa under center?
Yeah, and one of the things I walked away from that, it really started media day with the way Coach Locksley was moving around the room and talking about just, hey, it's just about letting it go. It's about having fun. Not that they're just all of a sudden not paying attention to details, but I think there's been so much pressure on that program because we talked about it, right? Is this the year? Is this the year? Is this the year? They're like, the heck with all of that stuff. We're just going to go out and do what we need to do. There's a defensive player, Jordan Phillips, on that team.
He's a dude.
He's one of those players, right? The numbers, it might not show up in the box scores, but he's going to demand a double team every chance he gets. One of the most athletic players that I have seen thus far. You talk about, and I've seen some special guys, but you talk about a defensive lineman, 300-plus pounds, that moves around like he's 195 pounds. It's really unbelievable to watch him move. But this is a team that's much better, too, and they're better in the offense and the defensive line, which is where, when you talk about trying to build a program, that's the hardest part to recruit to. But they found a way to recruit to. They've gotten better. They've gone into the portal and gotten the right guys for positions. So it will be fascinating to see this team move forward.
My recommendation when you get back on the tour, no more show and tell with defensive line.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
I know you're still in terrific shape, but
I thought we could really bring the people into the game.
Yeah.
The problem is we brought them into the game, and I suffered.
That's correct. The problem is that you're now hitting the Advil and the ice bath. That's what you got to do when you're on that training camp tour. You put your body on the line for you. I'm sure you're obviously going to be dialed in for this weekend's championship game against Brazil on Saturday as well. But you also have to balance that off with the fact that you have a game, your season opener, the very first live event of the year here on Big Ten Network in just, 8 days against another top 10 opponent. Are you going to have time to watch over the weekend?
We will make time to watch. That is everything for us and for our team. These are wonderful women and role models for our team, and many of our women aspire to be on the world stage someday. So we'll get together as a team. We'll head over to our administration building. We'll have a watch party, and we're going to celebrate this team.
That was from my conversation with Erica Dombach, Penn State head coach, who coached Alyssa Nair, U.S. Olympic team goaltender, her last 3 years in State College. Nair was ridiculous. It has gone viral, the kick save that she made against Germany, but she continued to just put up clean sheet after clean sheet. Immortality, first goalkeeper ever with a shutout in both a World Cup final and an Olympic gold medal game. She will go down as one of the immortals, one of the greatest in women's soccer history, certainly the greatest goalkeeper of all time. She and another Penn Stater, Sam Coffey, celebrate that gold medal together. And yes, the Penn State women's soccer team did get to have that watch party that Coach Dombach was telling me about, as all the current Nittany Lions got to watch gold. Such a special moment. Again, Alyssa Nair and this team giving the gold to the U.S., one of the highlights of all the Olympic Games. But there were so many Big Ten athletes that were part of this. Rai Benjamin. Now, yes, we are claiming some Big Ten athletes who just joined the Big Ten on August the 2nd. But Howard tells us that's okay. Benjamin and Team USA setting the new Olympic record. T.T. Terry also giving the Big Ten a little bit of love. South Carolina, USC alum, I should say. You should see the quote right there. Kennedy Blades, Iowa wrestling. Yes, women's wrestling, a huge deal right now. Iowa, as you would expect, one of the best in all of college wrestling, but also getting that international love. There are so many different athletes from so many different disciplines in so many different schools. USA Volleyball lost to Italy in that gold medal match. Italy was the top seed and expected to be the favorite. But overall, 98 medals won by athletes with Big Ten ties in Paris, including 27 golds. And now we have to figure out what we do without the Olympics to watch every night. More time watching the Big Ten Network, I suppose. No medals up for grabs in the Big Ten, but you know Nebraska would like nothing more than to get off this list. It's now been a quarter century since the Huskers won a football conference title, fourth longest such drought among current Big Ten schools, and that includes the recent addition of UCLA. See, we're adding the new schools in for everything.
Everything.
Not just for the benefit of Olympic medals. Rick Pizzo, a couple of more minutes with Howard Griffith. I know you're getting ready to go back on the road. You'll head to Lincoln. You'll see Matt Rule and the Huskers. Here is a guy who historically, in year two with a program, has made massive jumps. Did it at Temple, did it at Baylor.
Really does an outstanding job of building programs, and that's what Nebraska needed at that particular point. But you look at the schedule, this is the team that people and fan bases are getting really excited about what's out there. And you think about the young, talented quarterback that they have, five-star Raiola. They're putting a lot of pressure on this young man. I'm anxious to see how he's handling it, and also some of the other pieces that are going to be around him, because they're going to need everyone if they're going to take that next step.
So what is the next step? We showed the conference title drought, but I think it's more about getting back to the postseason and getting those 15 extra practices. That's got to be goal number one. Conference title would be a wonderful bonus. But realistically, I think they may not say it out loud, but that's what Coach Rule and the staff really needs to happen.
But I think you start to talk about taking those steps, right? And you mentioned it, being able to get bowl eligible, being able to go out and compete at a higher level, trying to bring this program back to where it's been. This is a different landscape than it used to be, right, for Nebraska. And I think that's a big part of what the fan base also has to understand. But this is a team that really, when they're maximizing all their resources, you think about the indoor facility that they have right now. Can't wait to get a look at that. The place is supposed to be phenomenal. It's going to do wonders for them and the players that are on that roster. But they've got to get back there. And when you think about Coach Rule and what he's been able to do in that second year, that's one of the reasons the expectations are so high right now for the program.
And you hate to beat the same horse over and over again, but if you're going to have a young quarterback, the one thing you have to do is avoid mistakes. And it has been the turnovers, not just under Matt Rule, but under Scott Frost, under multiple coaches beforehand. It has been the turnovers, and especially those costly late turnovers, wrong spots on the field, that's been the cause of all those losses for the Huskers.
Yeah, you think about turnovers, that's obviously an issue, and penalties as well. Things that they have to get cleaned up, but those are correctable things. Those have nothing to do with scheme. That's just about being able to take care of the football and be mentally disciplined and take care of the small things.
It is all about winning football, something that Matt Rule and the Huskers hope for in 2024. I hope for safe travels for you.
Thank you,
on your way to Omaha, Lincoln, everywhere in between. For Howard Griffith, I'm Rick Pizzo. As always, we appreciate you hanging with us here on Big Ten Today.